17. One dream. One fail.
30, 20, 10, touchdown Miami! One, two, three,
Hello, Miami Dolphins fans. How are you today? And thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast on this Wednesday, March the 18th. I'm your host, Michael Leva, joined by a very special guest making his first appearance on the Dolphins Talk podcast, Simon Clancy, who's been doing some writing for us of late here at the website. Also, you can catch him over at 3 Yards Per Carry, the 5 Reasons Network. He's got his shows over there, and he's doing the show, the draft show with Kyle Krabs as well. Simon, how you doing today?
Good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And on this show today, we're going to preview the draft. Simon does a great job. He's covered the draft for many years. He has great insight when it comes to the draft. And today we're going to sort of hone in specifically on the cornerback and safety positions, 2 big areas of need for the Dolphins. And each week we'll break down a few more positions, but this one's going to be cornerback and safety. Before I get to that, one quick bit of business first. This show is brought to you by Caneswear. Everyone go to the website, caneswear.com, for the best and most affordable Miami Dolphins apparel on the internet. If you need something for the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Hurricanes, the Panthers, the Heat, the Marlins, caneswear.com, caneswear.com, caneswear.com will have you covered. Check them out if you're in South Florida, 2655 South University Drive in Davie, Florida as well. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And super chats are open. Leave us a super chat. We will read it on the air before the end of the show. All right, I guess real quick, before we get to the corners and safeties, the Waddle trade. I know you wrote an article that's up on our website. Do you like the trade? Do you not like the trade? I thought they got back pretty good value for him. And for a team that really is going through a total rebuild, can't be too upset with this trade, in my opinion. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I think the value is good. Initially, my initial concern was I was worried about what it would mean for Malik Willis. Okay, you want to evaluate this guy ahead of what's looking like an amazing quarterback draft in 2027, right? But I think if you take a step back and you think about it, the Dolphins have already done their evaluation on him. They did it in 24 and 25 because they were around him. You know, John Eric Sullivan, Jeff Hafley, the guys that he brought over from Green Bay have seen him every single day. You know, he ran the scout team for Haf, all of those things. So for us thinking that his evaluation of Willis was going to go down this season, I think to a greater or lesser degree, it's actually happened over the last couple of years. And I also think that clearly it's part of the plan. The coaching staff and the front office know that there's going to be a year of torment in terms of capology and in terms of just not being able to have the players that they need. And I think that, you know, if they find themselves in a position next year where they're drafting 3rd or 5th or 2nd or whatever, they might be tanking in inverted commas or managing the decline. I don't think they're necessarily tanking for a quarterback because I think they've already made the commitment to their quarterback. He's 26. He's got one of the strongest arms in the NFL. He's the 2nd best running quarterback in the NFL behind Lamar Jackson. So I think actually what they might do is they might find themselves in a position where they're drafting 2nd and a team wants to move up for Lenoris Sellers or Dante Moore or Brendan Sorsby or a vast array of quarterbacks, Drew Mestermaker, CJ Carr, whatever, Arch, depending on what happens in terms of where he goes. And at that point, they can take a massive bounty, players, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe they're tanking, but not for a quarterback because they feel like they've got their quarterback. Maybe what they're doing is they're just managing a decline to increase the quality of players on their roster in the hope as well that obviously they hit on these 7 picks in the top 94. So I think overall it was a good trade. I think Jalen goes and does his thing. Cap-wise, his numbers going up to $33.7 million next year. It's a lot of money for a guy who isn't a number 1 receiver. Yep. Beginning to pick up some of those soft tissue injuries. And obviously he's had some issues with drops and those sorts of things. So good player. He's been a good player for us. I think hindsight will look back at it as a maybe an uncomfortable pick when you think that, you know, Penei Sewell was there, Micah Parsons was there,
Chase
Slater was there, Pat Surtain was there. We obviously traded out of the possibility to get Chase, then moved back up 6. Exactly, took him at 6, but still Sewell, Surtain and Parsons are all on Hall of Fame, they're on Hall of Fame curves in terms of how it's going. Yeah, absolutely. And Slater, you know, a 2-time All-Pro and, you know, was playing very well. And obviously he has the knee injury, but will be back. So, I think he played well for us. He was a very good forward for Tyreek Hill, but I think, what they got for him was a fair deal given his age and the salary.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Nice player. And where it was going to cost next year over 33 million, I think, on the cap or something. I thought they might wait till November to trade him at the deadline just because of the salary cap hit they take this year on top of all the other dead money. But when you get an offer like that, you go, you know what? We're in cap hell anyways. Who cares if we do it now or in November? Let's just do it now and take the picks in this year's draft and move on. So I thought this was going to come eventually. Just happened a little earlier than I thought it might have.
Yeah, I've not seen. I've been out for the last 3 or 4 hours, and I've not actually seen. But there's been reports about it, and you may know the answer to this. But certainly last night, Jeremy Fowler indicated that Miami were paying most of the contract.
Yeah, but I think all but $5 million. All but $5 million, I believe.
But interestingly, the Denver Post last night and then NBC Today have both reported that actually Denver have taken on all of the money. So I don't think there certainly wasn't any confirmation sort of 4 or 5 hours ago when I left the house. But I don't know if, and clearly,
I haven't seen anything else. Yeah,
but maybe we don't know yet at this point. But Miami essentially paying what looked like, certainly from Fowler's workings out, was Miami paying essentially what equated to $12 million for a 3rd round pick, which is kind of fine. But if Miami have managed to get Denver to pay all of it, that just adds to the quality of the deal, I think. So, that would be some serious work from John Eric Sullivan if that is the case, and from Brandon Shaw.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk cornerbacks. The big 2 names that everyone sort of lumps together are Mansour Delane from LSU and Jermod McCoy from Tennessee. Some people have one higher than the other. Which one do you rank higher, and how close are they?
I think they're very close. I have Delane over McCoy, but obviously, for people who know a little bit about college football and just come into it at the kind of the back end, the draft area, Jermod McCoy hasn't played. He tore his ACL in January. So 14 months ago, he tore his ACL whilst off-season training. Didn't play at all last season. The word out of Tennessee, the word out of Knoxville was that he was eligible to play and his knee was okay and he could have played down the back end, but he decided essentially just to prepare for the draft. Which he did. The unfortunate thing for Jermod McCoy and whoever represents him is that they decided that he wasn't going to do any working out at the combine. The knee got an all clear at the combine from the medical team. But the fact that he didn't work out, especially when you've decided you're not going to play and you're going to work towards the draft, to not work out and show teams, I think that will hurt his stock a little bit. And I think, I've spoken to at least 3 teams who were very disappointed that he didn't work out. He's a very good player. He's a very good player. But just to me, Delane, given the body of work, the fact that he's been available and the step up that he made, I thought 2 years ago he played very, very well for Virginia Tech. Then I don't think he had a great season for Tech, then transferred it to LSU into the SEC. And I thought he was absolutely outstanding last year. Yeah. He's an outstanding player. He grew up playing lacrosse. So it's very athletic, footwork, all of those sorts of things. But
that's hand-eye coordination right there in footwork and lacrosse. Yeah. That's all that is, yeah.
And he's not huge. He's 5'11", 186, so just a hair under 6 foot. But I think he's so scheme diverse, first of all. And I think, he came into the NFL consciousness basically off the back of the Hokies running that kind of zone scheme. And then when he went to LSU, he thrived in Blake Baker's kind of man-match system in the Bayou. But he also showed that he hadn't forgotten how to play zone because, when the Tigers switched it up, he was able to do it. And he's got great instincts. He's got range. He's got diagnostic skills. He was a safety for much of his prep career, Mike. So, and he's also just got a really strong football IQ, kind of rich grasp for understanding and reading concepts of all those different things, which is great. And he can change direction really well. And I just thought, the way that he played last season, the way that he was able to shut people down, and you look at some of the nuance and the minutiae of how he plays, the fast brain, the disruption at the catch point, the smoothness in his hips with no wasted movement, the footwork, the explosion in transition. And by that, I mean, when you're running backwards as a defensive back, it's when you plant that back foot in the ground and you drive forwards to the ball. How quickly is that a one motion movement thing? Do you have to gather steps, all of those sorts of things to get your feet under you? Delane doesn't do that. So fast feet, fast brain, everything tied together. And I just thought he was a very, very, very good player, a really good kid off the field. And actually, scarily, he might not even be the best Delane in his family. He's got a younger brother who was the number 1 safety in the 2024 class. He's gone to Ohio State, should take over from Caleb Downs next season. So
crazy.
Might be another Delane. So he's a really good player. McCoy, look, you throw on the tape from 2024, Mike, and this is an elite looking press corner who rarely got beat, outside of absolutely perfect deep balls, the spatial awareness, the ball tracking, was physical in run support, but just consistent, reliable. And again, like Delane, did the small things really well, so he would narrow the throwing window down the field by essentially, if two guys are running like this and this is the sideline here, what he does is he tends to just close that throwing window to move his receiver. Out, yep. To not out of bounds, but just essentially eradicating a landing window for the ball. Yep. And, so the movement ability is outstanding. What he's able to do, that the brain is outstanding. He can throttle up and down as receivers stem. He's quick, explosive to match and carry in man. I just do have a bit of a concern about the fact that he didn't work out. But overall, the size, he's a little bit bigger. He's 6 foot 194, just a little bit bigger. But the ball skills are there. I thought he could have ended up being cornerback 1. And I think if he played this season and continued that rise from his 2024 campaign, I think he would have ended up as a top 6 pick at worst. But he is scheme diverse. He can play in zone. He can play in man. He's aware, read and react, all of the things that you're looking for in a cornerback 1. It's just that we haven't seen him play. And it's a bit different to what happened in COVID. Remember when Jamar Chase and Sewell sat out because of COVID? They didn't sit out because they were rehabbing an injury that we haven't seen any movement from. They sat out because they didn't want to get sick, and they, all the
unique situation that year.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But look, he's great in press. He can play in zone. He finds the football. He's tough. A plus athlete when it comes to run fitting. Went to the same high school as Pat Mahomes. He's a very good player. It's just that ACLs are ACLs, especially for guys who have to, a lot of changing direction, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I see most of the mocks have Mansour Delane, so many mocks have him going to Miami at 11. Now, look, it's a mock draft. You take them for what they're worth with a grain of salt. Now I'm starting to see him going as high as 5 to the Giants, going in the top 10. So he might not even, who knows? We'll see. By the time this is all done in a month, when you go through the whole process, he might not even be there, pick number 11. And I think with McCoy, the ACL is what it is. And I think for Dolphins fans who are just so scarred from the Chris Greer era of him rolling the dice on these guys coming off an injury, and it never works out. Dolphins fans are in trauma. They're like, not with pick 11. I don't want to go through this. But you know what? Everyone's different. John Eric Sullivan's not Chris Greer. I'm sure he's going to do his homework. I don't think he might not even want someone who is coming off this type of injury from their mindset of the Packers and some of the stuff he said to the media thus far. But if he takes them, we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think that's more of a fan thing with the Dolphins who have this type of trauma, more so than a John Eric Sullivan thing, which we'll see what he does. Because I think he will be on the board of pick number 11. It comes down to, does he want him or does he go somewhere else, obviously, with some other position?
What I'll say about Sullivan, which I think fans really need to pay attention to, is that opening press conference where he got quite emotional at the end. He said a number of very important things, one of which was, we're going to get the quarterback first and we're going to build a team around it. We're not going to build a team and then find the quarterback. He's done that. Point number 2 was that he made it clear that essentially nobody was off the table for trading, that was the situation. And he made that clear with the trade for Minka, first of all, but then obviously for Jalen yesterday. And then the third thing that he said is that he's going to build from the inside out, which to me means trenches, which to me means offensive and defensive line. The Packers have done an unbelievable job over the last 20 years of finding talent on the offensive line. And they found it in the first round, but they also found it in the 4th round with guys like David Bakhtiari, in the 2nd round with guys like Brian Balaga and Darren College. They found JC Tretter, all sorts of like Corey Linsley, guys on the 3rd day that have gone on to have all-pro careers. So I think, the offensive and defensive lines, I think, will be a huge area of targeting for Sullivan, because that's what he said at the press conference. And then the other thing I think they will try and do is they'll try and I personally think what they'll try and do is they'll try and look to you go back and look at the success that Hafley had in Green Bay last year with the 2 players that they had essentially on the back end, in Xavier McKinney, who was the All-Pro, and Evan Williams, who is one of the best strong safeties in the NFL. McKinney allowed essentially, and what Haf likes to do, look at Boston College, he played a lot of cover 1. And in the NFL, he rotated a lot more coverage. He would often be in cover 3, would rotate into kind of 2 high looks. There'd be some quarters, all of those sorts of things. But he had McKinney, who was able to get outside the numbers and chase picks, which he did, 2 years ago. He had 6 picks, led the NFC, was a first-team All-Pro this year, second-team All-Pro. And then Evan Williams obviously comes down into the box and just hits people. He's just a hitter, a box safety who starts from deep and then rotates down inside and is just really devastating against the run. And I know that we're going to talk about safeties, but I do think that there will be some players on the board that Half will want to look and see who can be my Xavier McKinney. Can Dante Trader be my Evan Williams, for example? So do I try and find a single high or a 2 high free safety with a really good footballing brain that can really be that Xavier McKinney? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Next group of corners, for most people, I would say is the kid from Clemson. I'm about to sneeze. Avion Terrell. Yeah. And then after that, probably Colton Hood and Brandon Siss in that next group. How big is the gap, say, between Jermod McCoy and Avion Terrell? Is it a large gap? Is it somewhat of a smaller gap?
I think it's a small gap, but I think they're two very different players because they play two very different positions. I think that McCoy is an outside corner. I think Terrell is a slot corner. You know, he's the brother of AJ Terrell, the Falcons corner, and he's a good player. He's undersized, but he's very productive. He gets his hands on the ball a lot. He's he's got very good instincts. He can pattern match in the short areas. He plays the ball very well down the field. He's obviously not a jump ball guy. He's he's undersized in inverted commas, but he's got timing. He's got technique. He's competitive at the catch point. His play recognition is outstanding. His anticipation is outstanding. He's really good in zones. He's a very good leverage corner. And by that, I mean, he can leverage himself in front of the receiver to get, in front of the ball. He can be a bit grabby, which could be a problem. But to me, he absolutely projects as a nickel. And I think that will look. The nickel position is so important in the NFL, and
always on the field. They're always on the field.
Always on the field. I mean, always on the field. So it's not like it used to be when I don't know how old you are, Mike, but certainly when I was
48.
Up,
I'm old. 48.
Okay, I'm 52. So we've got a century between us, 100 years between us. But when we grew up, it was either 3 defensive linemen and 4 linebackers, or 4 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers, and then 2 corners on either side and 2 safeties. That is not how the game is played these days. No. So, like you say, a nickel corner is on the field all the time, and a great nickel corner. And you go and look at, a Kyle Hamilton who's not a nickel corner, but just does so much.
Plays it, yeah, pretty much.
Caleb Downs, who we're going to talk about in a minute, who's just an elite playmaker. But guys like Jalen Petrie, for example, at Houston, one of the best nickels in the NFL, but rotates back and forth to safety, does all of those things. Terrell's not going to go back and play safety, but he's certainly a very good cover nickel. And I think he can play a little bit of the boundary, but I think he just maximizes impact inside, and especially with what he can do with run support. I think he's 20 to 35 area. He'll be a kind of a team falls in love with him and know that he's going to fit a need here for them. So there's a kind of a poor man's Trent McDuffie, a kind of a big man's Amik Robertson, that kind of element to his game. If you kind of try and think about what box you would put Avion Terrell in. And then in terms of the other 2 guys that you mentioned, Colton Hood is a really good player. Colton Hood, the other corner at Tennessee.
The other corner from Tennessee, yeah.
He's good man corner, good zone corner. The explosion just drips off the tape. We saw it at the combine. Explosive. He's got real acceleration, can really close the gap. He's athletic. He's twitchy. He's really I love his patience in press man. He's got great reactive quickness. He's just a natural cover corner. I think he can speed turn. He can side saddle. He can do all the things that you want to do. He's a processor, good FBI, football intelligence, the vertical speed. I think his tackling needs to get better. But he's not afraid to do the dirty work. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. He's just not a great tackler. Then he rocked up at the Senior Bowl and had a good week. And then you mentioned Brandon Cisse as well, who, he's an interesting look. To me, he's an NC State transfer. I think he's smooth. I think he can press. I was pretty surprised, I have to say, that he didn't stay in school for next year. I felt like he could have just benefited. I think he'll be I could see him coming off the board in round 1. I would feel more comfortable taking Cisse in round 2. And that's not a knock on him. I just think he could have done with just a little bit more play time. I think he's fast, he's twitchy. He played mainly outside, back to the sideline kind of guy. So he sees the wide out and the quarterback. So there's that kind of, he's not dropping straight back. It's that kind of side saddle. He's fluid. He's loose as a mover. I don't think he's physical in press coverage, and I think teams could bully him. You go up against a Puka Nacua. I think you'll get bullied by those sorts of guys, and I think it will be a process for Brandon Cisse in terms of his starting and his assimilation with the game. I thought he ran a fast time yesterday or the day before at the South Carolina Pro Day. I think he's a good corner. I actually think there's a couple of corners ahead of that. Certainly I have, and I think some NFL teams have ahead of Cisse. I think that Chris Johnson of San Diego State is a guy that I think could end up in the first round potentially. I just think he's just so technically savvy. He's just a really, really good. I don't want to say flawless. No, nobody's flawless, but he's a very, very good technician. Not the high end size.
Technically sound is a nice way to say.
Very technically sound. He's smooth as a mover. The back pedal is really crisp. There's no wasted steps in that transition that we talked about earlier on. You watch the tape, you just can't help be excited by how smooth of a mover he is. The moment he sees a direct, he doesn't open his hips too early. A receiver will want to press the cushion and try and get the corner to essentially blink and move and open his hips, and then he can go, especially on two-way goes, that he can, work the side that he wants to work with. But he doesn't do that. He's anticipatory in what he does. He can be smothering. His eye work is excellent. And again, he's another guy with like a really good football brain, really good football intelligence, and a super special teamer as well. Even if he didn't start straight away, he's going to provide you a load of good snaps on special teams. He could play the nickel as well early on. He could be that sixth defensive back if he needed to be. And to me, in what is a pretty solid class of corners, when you go into guys like Julian Neal and Devin Moore and people like that, he looks like another top 40 pick.
Yeah. So, my thought process has been, if they go somewhere else at 11, if they go with an edge rusher, or if they go with an offensive lineman, or if they go with a safety even, now they got pick 30 at pick number 43 at the end of round 1, top of round 2. Guys like, if they're there, Hood, Cisse, Chris Johnson, Keith Abney. If they took either one of those guys at pick 30 or 43, that's probably where that's their range, kind of.
Yeah, that's the value. And I think there's some slot corners. There's some more pure slots, like D'Angelo Pons of Indiana, for example.
5'9", though. He's kind of small. I don't know.
5'9", but he's going to be a nickel. He's a feisty kind of nickel. He's going to.
Yeah.
The first guy off the bus is a phrase used to describe the team's most kind of physical player. And in that sense, Pons would likely be the last player off the bus. But actually, it never stopped him performing like one of the best corners in the last 2 years in the country. And, I just think, go back and look at like a guy like Jason Verrett, in terms of the injuries essentially ruined his career, but he has a very similar skill set. The other guy that nobody talks about is Traden Stukes of Arizona, who's a big guy. He's 6'2", 200. He's played 943 snaps at corner, 503 at safety. Played a lot of safety in 2025. Some teams I know have him at safety. Some teams have him in the slot. I think he'll move around all over the place. Arguably the best ball skills of any corner/safety I've watched in this cycle. Recovery speed, mirror ability. He's an older prospect. But the guy that coached him in high school said that, and he'd coached Chris McAllister, Aaron Ross, Justin Reed, Earl Thomas, Adoree Jackson, Talanoa Hufanga. He says he's the best player he's ever coached, which I think is pretty
Says something. Yeah.
It's something. And then obviously when it comes to corner, you've got those transitory safeties that we'll get onto in a minute, because not every safety now plays single high or too high. You've got safeties who just do all sorts of different things in terms of whether they rotate outside. They'll take an awful lot of nickel snaps. They'll be robbers. So that kind of that line between the sort of imaginary line at the bottom of the linebackers and the front of the secondary, those guys that, so the kid at the Cole Bishop, the Utah kid at Buffalo, is the perfect kind of robber. He's not a safety, but he's also not a corner, and he's not really a nickel. He operates in that kind of area where they can use his athletic ability. So there are all sorts of those guys as well when we get to the safety class that can do a multitude of jobs for this team, especially with how Hafley likes to set up his secondary.
All right, let's talk about these safeties. Let's start with the big one, Caleb Downs, Ohio State. I mean, if you're going to make a safety in a lab, it's him, and he's got the brain. I mean, it's just, is there any chance he falls to pick 11? I know there's been some talk about the knee issue, might have him slip. Is there any chance he falls to pick 11? And if he does, you think, I don't care who else is on the board, I think they're going to run that card up and take him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I spoke to a scouting director, college scouting director for an NFC team with a pick in the 20 to 32 area on Monday or Tuesday night. I can't remember what day we Wednesday, Monday night. And he said, anybody, and I said, what's the chances of Downs getting to 11? And he said, anybody that allows Caleb Downs to get to 11 should lose their job.
Exactly. Don't overthink this sometimes. Yeah.
He is the best player in the draft.
Yep.
I mean, he is the best player in the draft. I think, the one thing that you can rail against him is that he's 6'205" and he's not Kyle Hamilton size-wise. But, he's a better version of Brian Branch. And I thought Brian Branch was a top 15 pick. And that's been absolutely proven. And if Brian Branch was in this draft, you'd take him in the top 10 and you'd never look back. It is hard to quantify Caleb Downs' role because he is so good. And you sometimes have these players, Mike, that are kind of Swiss Army knives, but they're not amazing at one thing, but they're just really good utility at all sorts of things.
Good football players. Yeah.
He's amazing at all of these things. And that's why it's so hard to quantify what he does. He ties all that defense together. And I think if you look at the All-22 of Ohio State and you watch those three players, you watch Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, you watch them almost moving in unison as if you're watching like little kids playing soccer above, where they all just follow the ball around like migratory birds. But the three of them are just step ahead of each other, of everybody else the whole time. And Downs is the one that is the glue. He's so rangy. He has those kind of Buda Baker elements to his game. His technique is flawless in what he does. You can literally play him everywhere. All right. He can solve structural problems for a defense because each week, like Kyle Hamilton does, you could set him up to be, his versatility is so good that one week he could be part of the pressure package. The next week, he's a single high free safety. The next week, he's a 2 high rotating into the slot. The week after, he's literally in the slot the whole time. He is violent. He is sudden. He is a move piece extraordinaire, and everything that he does at the very highest level. He's violent. He's sudden. You watch him take on blocks. His block deconstruction is just unsafe in terms of what he does. He's got the speed to beat blockers to a spot. He's got the physicality just to go through people. You talk about angles to the ball. You talk about alley runners. So a guy that can come from deep and run to the sideline through a kind of an imaginary alley, avoiding the climbing lineman and his own teammates and those sorts of things. You just look at the tape and I've watched a lot of his film and it's really hard to find a fault or a flaw in what he does. And the backpedal, the drive, the stop start speed. Try and say that at 10:30 on a Wednesday night. The stop-start speed is outrageous. He's a very, very special player. A very special player.
Yeah. Next safety, I think, on most people's boards is a kid from Oregon, Dylan Thieneman. Probably a month ago, I saw most people would have him go top of round 2. Now I've seen as high as 15, 20 range, round 1 guy. What are your thoughts on him? You think there's a chance he's on the board of pick number 30 even? If so, I think he might. That's probably not going to happen at this point. I see him going, like I said, 15 to 25 range probably is where he's going to go, I think.
I think his floor is 18. I think he's the absolute perfect replacement for Harrison Smith in Minnesota. You look at what he's done, and what he's done is fascinating because he's essentially had 2 careers. He had the first career at Purdue, where he played very much of the kind of free safety, elite speed, elite ball skills, the kind of center fielder role, athletic, able to get outside the numbers and make picks and make plays and all those sorts of things, which, just the playmaking range that he showed, was just... middle of the field to get outside to vertical shots outside the numbers, just rangy as anything, whereas with Oregon, he's done so much more. He's, and you go back and you look at, a Dan Lanning defense and everything that he's had to do. He's run deep half, he's played deep middle, he's played quarters, he's, the curl flat underneath areas, he's been in the slot, like a kind of a Cooper DeJean kind of guy, the hook man stuff. He's seen it all because that's what Dan Lanning does. So you've really got these 2 careers where you could say what he's done at Oregon, but can he play single high? Can he play 2 high in the safety? Can he play, deep down the field behind the numbers, driving on the ball to the outside, all those things? Because I haven't seen it. Oh, well, actually go back and he's got 2-3 years of tape at Purdue. And if you only see the Purdue tape, you think, well, great, but is he just that kind of too high over the top, single high. No, he can come down in the box. He can hit. He's got range. He's fast. His combine performance was outstanding. Around the 4.34. Jumped out the building. He's got height. He's got physicality. He's a really good player.
Emmanuel McNeil Warren out of Toledo is another guy who's got a lot of hype right now. He's sort of flying up draft boards again. About a month ago, most people thought round 2. Now people saying late round 1 maybe. What are your thoughts on him? And also Kamari Ramsey out of USC.
Yeah, I'll take McNeil Warren first. McNeil Warren is one of those very rare players that and I don't know how much, Mike, you study or you ever get to look at kind of college heights and weights, but essentially just colleges lie. Because that's why the combine and the Senior Bowl are so important, because guys that are listed at 6'5", 267 pounds turn out to be 6'3" and 242 or whatever. Emmanuel McNeil Warren is pretty much the only player I've ever come across whose height and weight was taller and heavier than is listed either Toledo or Bowling Green, where he started his career, which in itself is amazing. This guy is an absolute ball hawk. He's very different. He's a cover 2 defender, I think, because of what he brings to the table, but he is a ball hawk. 5 forced fumbles in 2 seasons. He's got 11 career forced fumbles. He's got the length to shed blocks. He can be an enforcer over there. He's a hitter. He's agile. He's instinctive. He's rangy. Lateral explosion. He's a really good player. Eye discipline, the physicality, no fear of contact whatsoever. Just a punishing tackler with some serious stopping power in his shoulder pads. Ramsey is a player I like. There's a couple of players I kind of want to get to as well.
Go for it. Just go.
Ramsey, good player. I liked his 24 tape as a true free safety. What we would consider a true free safety was a bit more of a mixed bag last year. He had to move into the slot because of injuries on the back end, and because he's just a good player. I think he processes well. He's got timing. I want to see him as a single high safety. Sometimes I worry about the ball production. He's only had 2 career picks. He was at UCLA for 2 years, USC for 2 years. Only 2 career picks, only 11 PBUs. He's the green dot. He was the green dot for the last 2 years, so he's intelligent, good football intelligence, all of those things. I just want to see a little bit more from him. He's young. He won't turn 22 until just before the start of the season. And there's definitely things there that he can do outside of the numbers. To me, he's a roof of the defense guy. The guy I love, and the guy that I think that John Eric Sullivan will target because Jeff Haffey will really like, is AJ Halsey, who's the kid at LSU, who's a Houston transfer. He is just an absolute playmaker. 8 picks the last 2 seasons. He ran a 4.53 in a 215-pound frame. I mean, he's a big hitter, but he is so good and you'd think, he's 215, he's a hitter. You're going to have him in the box. You're going to have him like doing the dirt. That's not him. He is a free safety. He is a ball hawking free safety who maybe lacks the kind of athletic courage of some of the others in the class, but his brain is so wired to being in the right place at the right time. I don't think there's a single player, and I probably include Caleb Downs in this, where you just think the brain is so good that maybe, he doesn't have the NFL range quite, but what he brings to the table in terms of his mentality, multiple defensive schemes that he's played. LSU play a very complicated defensive scheme. He's played in so many different roles. I just think what he does from a mental point of view and being in the right place at the right time. He's played almost 4,000 snaps.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot. And he's not, I think he's only 22. But this is special teams and defense. I think he's played 3,000 defensive snaps and 800 special team snaps or something ridiculous like that.
It's crazy.
He is, to me, the split safety stuff is where he's at his best. He's just really, really good at understanding the distribution of routes in the modern NFL, all of those sorts of things. Leverage points, he understands. I just think as a middle of the field safety, he is going to be a guy that Hafley loves. And then we talked about those kind of different roles. And if you're looking at a big nickel, Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina is a big nickel. He is a big guy, 6'1". He was 217 last season, slimmed down to 210 for the Senior Bowl. He's a little bit high-hipped, but you go and watch his tape against Alabama, okay? He lines up one-on-one in the slot for the entire game against Ryan Williams, who's, he's had his struggles with drops.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. South Carolina essentially trusted him enough to play him against Casey Concepcion and Antonio Williams, two of the twitchiest slot receivers in this draft. He essentially replaced Nick Emmanwori. I think he's more instinctive than Emmanwori. I don't think he's quite as physical. He's got that kind of Cooper DeJean skill set in terms of what he can do. He can turn and run for a big guy. 23 miles per hour on the GPS. He ran a 4.40 at the combine. 7 picks the last 2 seasons. So physical at the catch point. And you can just move him around the secondary. You can you can bring him into the box and you can just punch people in the mouth. He's a really good player. And again, somebody that you can just put in that kind of slot role as a big nickel, can eliminate tight ends, eliminate those big, slot receivers. He's a good player. He's a good player.
And I'll say this sort of just to wrap this up here. They have so many needs, Miami. Really, outside of running back, they have needs everywhere. And now they got 7 picks, top 94. These 2 spots which is why I wanted to start here with you this week, are so deep this year in this draft. People talk about the draft. Is it a good draft, a great draft, a bad draft? It's not a great draft, but it's also in this area where they have needs, Miami, because you look at their secondary right now, they got nothing. This is a good year to have this many picks here in the top 100 because you can get a couple of these guys who hopefully you hit on the right ones who can come in and help right away, because there's nobody in front of them on the depth chart. I mean, So if this is a spot where I think John Eric Sullivan and Hafley are going to go to town here and get probably in those top 94. I don't know how many of the 7 they're going to use on the secondary. I think at least 2, probably 2 is probably the max. But I think they can get 2 quality guys because there's a lot of players here. So at pick 11, if they don't go with a corner, say one's on the board, I'm not going to stress. Nobody should. Because I think the sweet spot for these 2 spots is from pick 30 to probably 75 or 87 range. There's going to be so much talent there at safety and corner. They can really get quality players. Yeah,
and I think we touched upon the top 5 or 6 guys, but you've got Devin Moore, Florida at 6'3", 199. You got Big
Scott
Julian Moore, 6'2", 208. You talked about Abney. Abney's a good player. You got Will Lee, who's 6'1", 189. Davis Nigbenosen, big, physical, 6'2", 193. Hezekiah Masses. Nobody talks about this kid from Cal. He's an outstanding player. Malik Muhammad of Texas. Big, physical
I love him.
guy. Takario Davis, 6'4". Damani Jackson, the California State 100-meter champion, would have been 6th in the heats in the Paris Olympics with his 10:25 100-meter time. Ephesians Prysock, 6'4", 195. These guys, especially in terms of the skill set that they like. And then you go to the nickel guys, the slot guys. We talked about Pons, we talked about Traden Stukes, Chandler Rivers at Duke, Keontae Scott at Miami. There's a kid at Oregon, Jaden Kennedy. This kid is everywhere on the field. You go and look at those receivers out west, the Denzel Bostons and these kind of guys in the draft, and Kennedy's just marking everybody out, covering everybody out the game. There's a kid at Nebraska who I really like, Sierra Wright. He's 6 foot, 190. He'll probably be a day 3 guy. Really, really good player. Just long arms, explosive, hip sync, physical, super competitive. People aren't talking about these guys, but Sullivan historically has been part of a Green Bay team that have absolutely killed it in the middle rounds of the draft. That 3, 4, 5, 6 they found whilst he's been there. And yes, Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, Brian Gutekunst, he's been part of that. He understands what it takes to find good contributors and good starters on in those areas of the draft. And if they can do that and then hit on those early picks as well, I think that'll be really important.
2 comments I want to share. One from our chat is just absolutely brilliant. From Retiring Soon in South Carolina. Been married 36 years. My wife has never talked about me like Simon just did about Downs. Retiring soon. First off, congratulations on your retirement. Second part, when you can tackle and when you can cover like Caleb Downs, your wife will talk about you that same way, Simon.
Yeah, if Mrs. Retiring Downs can see you moving, destructing blocks in the back garden and all of those things. If you can do that, then she will absolutely talk about you like that. But
that's a brilliant comment. And we did get a super chat from our friend Eric said, my position picked without more trades for a top 7 O-line, edge, corner. Say, I mean, look, those are the spots they're going to take. I don't know if it's going to be that order exactly, but I do think with the first pick 11. I'm thinking if the right tackle from Miami falls, if not,
Yeah.
that guard from Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
Ione. Oh my God, he's the safest pick, and he is. You can plug and play him, and you ain't got. You want to talk about losing the soft label? You put him. I don't care if it's pick 11 and you don't take a guard that high. Bullshit. He that good, you can take him that high because that solves a problem day one.
Of course it does. I think if you got to 44, i.e., we've had our picks at 11, 30, and 43, with, let's say, Vega Ioane, the guard, the left guard at Penn State, TJ Parker at Clemson, and AJ Halsey from LSU.
Hell of a start.
That's a hell of a start. And then you're entering the area where Sullivan has historically been part of something really special in that 3, 4, 5 area. So, you come out with something like that, and then you can attack, those positions of need, whether that's finding yourself a Julian Neal or a Devin Moore, or then it's attacking that middle portion of that receiver group, which is really good, whether that's Chris Brazzell at Tennessee, whether that's Malachi Fields, whether that's, Jeremy Bernard or Josh Cameron at Baylor, or Eric McAllister or Elijah Surratt or Skylar Bell.
I love the Alabama kid. I love the Alabama kid.
He's great. Stribling, I like Stribling at Ole Miss, Ted Hurst at Georgia, Bryce Lance at North Dakota State. You attack that area, and all of a sudden you get to pick 94, and you've got yourself, a safety, an edge, a couple of offensive linemen, a receiver. You're going to be absolutely flying. So the players are out there. I don't think it's the best draft in the world, but I think and like you say, the Dolphins have got a lot of needs, but good players at receiver. There's some solid players at tight end. There's some offensive linemen that can really help you. It's a decent edge group. I think it's a very good off-ball linebacker group if you're looking for somebody to pair with Jordan Brooks. I think it's a strong corner group, and I think it's a really good safety group. So, the players are there. Can he find them?
Yeah. Thank you, Eric, again. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, follow Simon Clancy on Twitter, X at SI Clancy. You can read his work at our website, DolphinsTalk.com, and check him out on 3 Yards Per Carry on the show he does with Chris and Alf. And, of course, the draft show he's doing with Kyle Krabs as well. We'll be back next week. We'll probably cover the front 7 next week on defense and polish off that side of the ball before we move on to offense. Everyone have a great Wednesday night, and we will talk to you again after a while.